I'm gonna break a wood bowl turning rule. Hi, I'm Kent, and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. Today, I'm going to break a wood bowl turning rule. Well, it's more of a best practices more than anything. And what that is I'm going to include the pith, or the center of the log, in the bowl that I'm going to be turning. I'm going to turn the entire log. Now, normally what we do is we'll take a log and we will split it down the middle, right through that pith. And if it's a big log, sometimes we make multiple cuts to cut around the pith. Why? Well, the pith has a lot of tension in it and has a tendency to crack. Even like this little sliver has done right here, it's starting to crack there a little bit. If you know the tree species that you're turning, in this case, I'm turning ligustrum, which is a local species that I've turned several other pieces with this, and a couple of those I have included the pith in the sides of the bowl. And that pith distorted, cracked and opened up just a touch, but it wasn't very dramatic. And the overall look of the piece and the beauty of this grain is well worth having just a little bit of imperfection there. Now, this gorgeous log is ligustrum. This is unusually large. Most of these are not this large. This is a very old tree, and I acquired this in a very unique way, and I'll explain that more to you in just a minute. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be including the pith in the side of this bowl, and I'm willing to accept if there are some slight cracks in that pith. Based on my experience with this tree species, it doesn't typically just blow apart. There are many tree species where if I were to do this and leave the pith in the side, there's a chance the bowl will just crack in half and be completely worthless. I'm expecting there to be some minor cracks in that pith area, and I expect it to distort as it dries, but I think all in all, it's going to stay intact, and that's what my ultimate goal is for this bowl. So I'm going to get this mounted to the lathe, and we're going to start turning this with the pith included, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so there's a lot going on, especially when we decide to turn an entire log. And I also have some surface cracks here, and I want to deal with those. I obviously want to avoid the largest ones. So what I'm thinking here is that I'm going to position the bowl so that that crack is at the bottom and will be completely removed. That'll be the center. Actually, I think this will be the center going across the center of the pith, and this will be the curve of the bottom of the bowl. I'm going to make a relatively large base on this. This is going to give me a lot of leeway to shape it however I'd like. And it'll also remove some of those cracks. I also have these dimples on the sides that I have to be aware of. And I think the way I have it positioned, those dimples should be removed in the overall shape. This is the profile of the bowl, and this is the profile of the foot. So what I can do is I can lop off that bottom portion right here with the bandsaw. We'll get that out of the way so that that can be removed and make the turning a little bit easier. So I'll take this over to the bandsaw and slice off the bottom portion. I want to be careful, obviously, how you hold that. I didn't really like that position on the outside. Just take your time. Don't really want to force it through. Just let the blade do the cutting. Okay, so now the bottom's removed. I took the chisel and I flattened out a spot on the top of the log, and I've centered my faceplate there, and I'm going to attach the faceplate with good quality wood screws. Now I'm using my driver bit, or I'm using my impact driver rather, and I'll tell you what, this is so much better than a standard drill driver. The impact driver can drive these screws into the log so effortlessly. I don't know if you've ever used one of the old traditional drills to do this. It can be tedious, and the screws get stripped a lot, and it's just very frustrating. So I highly recommend the impact driver, and I'll have a link to that as well as all the other equipment that you see in this video in the description below. Okay, so with the faceplate attached, I'm going to go ahead and attach that to the lathe. And I'm going to bring my tool rest up, make sure that I've got clearance. And I'm also going to bring the tailstock up just for some added support initially. I like to add or bring in the live center on the tailstock with the lathe turning. That helps guarantee that I hit the center, to truly hit the center where the tailstock meets the wood piece. Okay, so the first bowl gouge I'll be using is my 5/8 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. This is the bowl gouge I use primarily for roughing out material and removing the bulk of the wood for a bowl. And I'm going to start rounding off the corners of the bottom of this bowl. When you have a large piece like this and you're doing a roughing cut, and what I'm doing is I'm getting smacked from both sides. I don't have a solid cut here. I'm basically cutting both ends. So it can be very uneven. What you really want to do is you want to apply pressure down into the tool rest. You can see that bottom corner starting to take shape. As soon as that corner's out of the way, I need to move the tool rest up so I've got good support. But what I was getting at is you want to push down. In this case, with my left hand, I'm pushing very firmly down into the tool rest and focusing my energy there so that the bowl gouge isn't getting bounced around. What you really don't want to do is you don't want to be pressing the bowl gouge in towards the turning, because you're going to get smacked with each side of the bowl blank as it comes around, and you're going to have a very rough experience. It's not going to be very pleasant. Instead, focus your energy down into the tool rest and focus on making just a really nice pass across there, and let the sections of the bowl that come around, there you can see where I'm applying that down pressure. Just let the sections of the bowl come around and be sliced off as you're making your pass. I also have my lathe speed turned down significantly here because we have a large log or a large bowl blank and it's not balanced yet. There's unevenness, so if I get the speed up much faster than this, there's going to be noticeable vibration, and I really don't want that. If you want to know more about lathe speed and how to set the proper lathe speed when turning bowls, I have a video all about that. You want to check that out. So I'm just going to rough out the bottom shape of this bowl. And once I get to this certain point, I'm going to work from the top down. And now we're seeing the shape take place. The grain is starting to come out. That looks really, really nice. And I wanted you to see this point of view so you can see how I'm shaping the profile of this bowl. So I got this wood from a gentleman that I know, Floyd. He has a home that's actually not far from me that was in the path of a tornado a couple months ago. Yeah, we had a tornado come through our town on a Saturday morning and did quite a bit of damage. It took out trees all over the place. It damaged some apartment buildings, and so there was a lot of wood that was the result of this tornado passing. Well, Floyd had this ligustrum in his yard, and it had been there for a long time. I didn't get a chance. I do have those little cross sections. I should sit and try to count the rings. The only trick with counting the rings on a ligustrum is they're very random. They're not very evenly distributed. It's interesting how this tree grows. But I bet if I sit and look at them, I could probably figure out roughly what the age of this tree is. But it's a very old tree. Typically, ligustrum is grown as a shrub or a privet. And it's actually in the olive family. And you can see some of that in the grain pattern. It has a very olive type of wood texture to it, and this, I guess, it's part of the reason why I like it. And there's something about it. I don't know if it's the oil content or if it's some other element that's in the wood itself, but it just has such a neat quality to it. I don't know exactly what it is. It'd be interesting to know what it is inside this particular tree species that makes it so nice to turn and so beautiful as far as the grain direction. So what I'm doing here is I'm turning the tenon and the shoulder. And I'm going to make the shoulder relatively steep. If you remember the foot that I drew on the side of the log, I'm making enough shoulder here so that I'll be able to carve that foot out of the shoulder. So I like making clean shoulder at the base of the bowl, and that gives me a point of which to go to. And you can still see that little indented dimple there. It's mostly removed. It shouldn't be a problem. The foot's going to be a little smaller, so that will be removed in the bottom of the foot. I'm going to leave it there for now so that we have support when I turn this around and mount it into the 4-jaw chuck. I'm using my detail spindle gouge here to shape the base of the tenon. Again, you want to make sure that's nice and cleaned out, and I've got a video all about that you should check out if you'd like. The tenon's very important as far as maintaining a very good connection to the 4-jaw chuck, the shape of the tenon in particular. Okay, so now that I've made the tenon in the shoulder, I have what I like to call is point B. That's the bottom of the bowl. And really the only thing I need to do at this point is connect the top of the rim, which is point A, to point B with the curve or the shape that I'm going to use. And by establishing that tenon in the shoulder, it makes it really nice because you can easily see that you essentially have to go from the rim down to that point just above the shoulder. So now that I've got a general shape of the base of the bowl, I'm going to start working on the top of the rim, move the tool rest up so I have some good support. Now I'm actually doing a cut in a direction that is not a supported grain cut. Now why would I do that? Well, this is going to be a live edge bowl, which means the bark will be along the rim or the top edge of that. If I were to make the cuts from what you're seeing right here from the right to the left, as I go across the open end of the rim of the bowl, I will most likely just tear off any bark that's up there. So instead, what I'm going to do is go from left to right, which is an unsupported grain cut. And that's going to help maintain the bark on the edge of the rim of the bowl. I'm only going to do that to create the shape of the bowl, and then I will continue to bring the bottom curve and merge it with the top. When I do a live edge piece like this, I basically need to work down so there's no flat ends on the side of the bowl blank. So I'll make these passes from the top of the rim down until I get a continuous curve from the very top of the wings up. Here you can see there's a little bit of a flat spot still there. You just want to take your time. When I get closer to the actual depth here, I've switched over to my 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. This gives me a little bit more refined cut. The bowl blank is now becoming more balanced as well, and if you just saw, I sped up the lathe. The quicker you can get this turning safely and within the safe range, again, check out my wood lathe speed video so you know what a safe range of speed is for a wood bowl. The quicker you can get this up, the cleaner cut you're going to get. There you can still see I have a flat edge there, so I need to remove material there from the rim down. I'm making a very thin cut here, just one thin cut at a time until I get down to a complete roundness. All the pressure is going down into the tool rest, and I'm shifting my body weight, which you saw in the other video that I created about how to move your body when you're turning bowls. I'm just shifting my body weight forward to make a really light, clean pass. Now I'm also noticing that the tool's not cutting as sharp as it should be, so I'm going to go over here, especially when we get close to the last couple passes. I want to make sure I've got a really sharp bowl gouge, so I'm going to go ahead and sharpen this up. Now if you've got your sharpening station set up and your tool is dialed in, you should only need a couple seconds over at the sharpening station to bring your gouge right back to a really nice sharp condition, just like that. Okay, so I'm going to make a very light pass here. I'm going to get the lathe going a little bit quicker if I can. Between the strobe effect of the light and the video, it's hard to tell, but the bowl is turning a little bit faster than it was before. I'm going to make a very light pass. So you can see there the shadow line, just how light that pass is. Following the curve of the bowl from top down to the bottom. We'll take a look at that. And there we go. We've cleaned up the edges. There's no flat spots. That's all we need. Now what I have to do is I have to bring the bottom of the bowl up to match that top curve. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of material that needs to be removed. So I'm going to jump right back in there and get a little more aggressive, roughing out that material quickly. Now when I'm making these cuts, I do look at my tool in the cutting edge as it's engaged in the wood, but I'm looking across the bowl blank, the top of the bowl blank, at the profile of the bowl, kind of what you're seeing at the top of the screen right now, or the top of the bowl. That's what I'm trying to look at. And there you saw I was backed up and I'm looking at the edge there and seeing how those are lining up. I don't want to get too aggressive here because I don't want to go and undercut that rim shape that's been created. I want to just bring the bottom of the bowl shape right up to the edge that I created at the top of the bowl. Okay, that's looking good. There's a little high spot there. I'm not worried about that because we'll be able to deal with that in just a second, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay, the bottom of the bowl is looking a little clunky, so I'm actually going to bring the shoulder up just a touch and get the curved shape at the bottom of the bowl going just a bit better. Again, this is the roughing stage of the bowl. And bring that shoulder up. It seems like I'm wasting a lot of wood here, but what I'm really doing is I'm creating a nice flowing curve that will go from the bottom of the bowl up through the sides up to the top of the wings of the bowl. You want to be careful when you do a push cut like this. You want to make sure that you're making a nice thin cut and you're not getting too aggressive and over cutting it, because then you'll have to come back from the top and try to match that up. And if you do that enough times, you're going to be left with a small doorknob versus a nice sized bowl at the end. Okay, I'm taking the shoulder down a bit more. I don't want to take it down too much so I start losing support. This is my 1/2 inch bowl gouge, and I'm extending there a bit. I'm going to do like basically a pull cut. And then with this high spot, I'm going to do a push cut. But I'm going to make sure that that's a very light cut. I just want to cut across that surface and make a nice flowing continuous curve. Now there's some tool marks there. I'm ignoring those. If I try to engage them or if I try to cut those away, again, I'm probably going to shave off too much material. So instead, I'm just going to make a nice even push cut. I'm going to leave those tool marks for the moment. I have a way of dealing with those that you'll see here in just a second. And the pith's there. There's some cracking going on, but I'm not ultra concerned with that at the moment. So the way I'm going to deal with those tool marks is by using the shear scrape. Now I've got a video all about the shear scrape, and if you haven't seen it, you really do need to see it because this is a great technique to use when you're turning bowls. What I'm basically doing is I'm using the lower wing of the bowl gouge to shave away the surface material. And I'm taking the handle of the bowl gouge and have it down at an angle. Now I was getting a little vibration there with my 1/2 inch bowl gouge, so I switched up to my 5/8 inch bowl gouge. This is a little bit beefier tool and it won't vibrate as much when I have to extend it over the tool rest a couple inches like you're seeing there. And you can see what I'm doing is I'm basically just shaving that surface. Now I'll work one area at a time, and I need to reposition the tool rest so that I have about a 90-degree or perpendicular support for the tool. So there the tool's well supported. I have the handle of the tool drop down, and I'm just lightly shaving away those tool marks. And if you're delicate and you keep your location of the tool right on the edge of the bowl, you can do this right up to the top of the wings. Obviously, you do not want to slip and go into the bowl because you're going to get, that tool is going to get smacked by those wings. Just go very light and shave that surface and remove all those tool marks. Now there's a couple little high spots there that are causing a little bit of an issue, and the best way to deal with those is to mark them with a pencil and just focus on taking that height down ever so slightly. And it's a good idea to make sure to check this with your fingers, feel around for any high spots or rough areas, and address them now. It's like I love to say, the outside of the bowl or the exterior of the bowl is the bowl. If the outside isn't shaped properly, it doesn't matter what you do on the inside of the bowl, it's not going to make the bowl look any better. So take your time and make the outside of the bowl look great. So here there were a couple other little high spots there, and you can see how delicately I'm just so gingerly shaving those off with a shear scrape. Okay. The outside of the bowl is shaped, and I'm really happy with it. Look at the wood grain. Isn't that amazing? And it's so cool to see the pith in there too, because you really get a sense of a true cross-section of the tree when you see the pith and all of the surrounding grain sections to it. Again, I'm going to use my impact driver to pull out these screws. The impact driver is just so nice. And it's amazing how lightweight this is too. They make them so small, and you can just so quickly and effortlessly take those screws out. Okay, so now I'm going to mount the bowl to my 4-jaw chuck using the tenon that was created earlier. And I'm going to bring the tool or the tailstock up briefly for some added support. I'm going to make some perpendicular cuts here just to kind of shave down some of that bark. And it's a good idea to have the tool rest up there. Whenever you can add the tool rest, it's a good idea to have it in place. I won't be able to keep it here for very long because it's going to be in the way, but for the moment, it's a good idea to have it there. And it's also a great idea to do what I just did there, which is to hand turn the bowl prior to turning on the lathe to make sure that nothing is in the way of those wings. Nothing worse than taking all this time to make those wings of the bowl look nice and keep them intact, and then ding it up accidentally by having the tool rest in the way or the banjo in the way. So I'm going to just level off some of this top surface. Everything we're doing now is balancing the bowl up more and more. This bowl won't ever really be truly balanced because of the organic nature of the upper exposed rim, but it'll get a lot more balanced as I keep turning. And because of that, I'll be able to turn the speed of the lathe up. Okay, so I'm immediately going right to the wall thickness. If you guys have watched more than one or two of my videos, you know how I core out the inside of a bowl, and that is from the top down. And this is a great reason why. This is a perfect example. A natural edge or live edge bowl like this it's absolutely necessary to work from the rim down. And I was noticing that I'm not getting a good cut. And again, I'm coming up to an important area of the bowl, is the inside of that rim, and I want to make sure I've got a clean, sharp bowl gouge. So I'm jumping over to my sharpening station. Again, super simple when everything's set up. I've got a course all about tool sharpening and tool shaping that is an online course. You might want to check that out. Some great information there. If you want to use a 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge like mine, I will show you how to shape one and get it all set up to be able to do what you're seeing right here. Okay, so back to the bowl. What I'm doing is I'm looking straight down on the outside edge of the bowl blank. I'm seeing that exterior that I took the time to make sure was the shape that I wanted, and I'm matching the bevel of the bowl gouge and making the bevel parallel with the exterior of that bowl. And I'm just making light passes to get the cut started down into that wall. Now, The reason I'm doing this is I want to establish that wall thickness, and I want to work down into the bowl to create that even wall thickness all the way down inside the bowl. Because this has random or organic shaped wings, if I didn't do this, if I started from the center out and tried to make my last few passes all the way from the top of the rim down to the bottom of the bowl, these wings are going to be vibrating and they're going to be flexing, and I'm not going to get a good clean cut. Instead, with the core of the bowl intact in the center like you see now, that is supporting those outside walls and preventing them from flexing much. So I can get a really nice precise cut here, and I can work down and maintain that precision as I work down into the bowl. But what I can't do is once I'm down deep into the bowl, I can't come back up onto that rim without expecting there to be some type of vibration, because again, those outer wings are going to be flexing. So basically just take your time and you work down from the top down the inside of the bowl. And I like to work in a pattern where I clear out an area near the wall, and then I bring that center core down just a bit. And it kind of creates what I call a ditch or a cavity down along the wall side, so then I can work down the next section of the wall and make that thickness equal to the previous section. So the idea is you keep working down and you have this continuous wall thickness all the way from the top rim all the way down through the bottom of the bowl. Now, a question that I'm anticipating that I will get in the comments is, well, why didn't you core out the center of that bowl? Why didn't you make another bowl blank and core that out and use that for another bowl? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, I wanted to focus on making this log into a really nice bowl in and of itself. And that means I really need to pay attention to what I'm doing with the outer shape and the inner shape. And if you're going to core a bowl, and the system that I have, which is the one-way coring system, essentially needs a half spherical or a hemispherical shape. You really need to make the bowl blank for that cutting tool. And instead, I'm more focused on making this bowl work as a bowl for itself first. It's kind of hard to explain, but essentially you really need to make a shape that's intended to have a inner bowl cord from it. And that's not necessarily what I'm doing here. Also, if I were to core out that bowl in the middle, I'm going to lose all that structural support that I just explained to you that I have now as I'm working that wall thickness down on the exterior or the interior of this bowl. And then another reason is I have so many pieces of wood, and I don't mean to brag, because I know there's a lot of people around the world can't get good timber to turn. I've heard from people all around the world, from the Middle East and deserts where there are almost no trees growing, to areas in England where everything has been so over-harvested that nobody is allowed to take a tree or touch the wood from a tree that comes down, which I can't even imagine. But so I understand and I sympathize with that, but I do have a ton of wood here. I have enough bowl blanks to keep me going for many, many years. And while it would be nice to save every little morsel of wood to turn another bowl with, there's just no reasonable amount of time that it could possibly be done. So that's part of the reason why I didn't do that. And I just want to focus on making this one bowl really well. And that's what I'm working on here. And we do have to keep things in perspective here, because I've got so much tree stuff that comes down, tree material comes down in various storms, and that there's no way to keep up with it. And the majority of it just gets wasted or mulched and composted. Okay, there's a crack on the outside of this that's concerning me. It does seem to be expanding a bit, so I'm going to slow that down. I'm using a tight bond glue called Quick and Thick, and it essentially it's tacky, and it makes it really nice for a situation like this. It won't go flying out the edges. Because this cavity goes all the way through, I want to fill this from both sides, and I'm going to use some sawdust or some shavings to fill that top surface. We'll sand this down a bit and it will be pretty much hidden. But I'm going to work glue in from both sides to slow down that crack. What I don't want is I don't want to let the drying process and the turning process make this big, large crack expand. Okay, with that secured, I'm going to continue the process of turning the inside of the bowl here. Yeah, I started doing some digging around and discovered that the ligustrum tree species is in the same family that olive trees are in. And it's pretty interesting because if you do look at the interior of this, or the grain of this particular tree species, it does resemble the olive wood that you see occasionally, which is pretty neat. But this is typically, these trees are small and more in bush form than tree form. This is a very unusual large log from a big old tree. I am going to sit down and try to figure out the age of this, I think. There's something very relaxing too about this back and forth method of taking down the side wall and then clearing out some of that core. Now when I get down to the wall thickness here, what I'm doing is I'm rubbing the bevel and just lightly merging up with the previous cut, and then just sneaking up on that wall thickness. It's really critical not to overcut that inside wall and go too deep to where you have a thinner area. We absolutely don't want that. Okay, and I've put my J tool rest in place here, and this is going to give me the ability to get in a little bit deeper into the bowl with added support. And I'll pick up where I left off, just taking that core area down and then working into the wall. Each bowl gouge has a certain maximum amount of material that it can remove. This is my 1/2 inch bowl gouge. And you can see the path that I'm making. That's about as much material as this gouge can handle in one pass. Any more than that, it's going to start overloading the gouge, and it's going to give a really great opportunity for a catch to occur. I also am stopping right before I get to that previous cut. If I were to make this pass right here, for instance, and then go into the next cut, that's going to completely overwhelm the bowl gouge and it's going to make a nasty catch. So that's why I'm stopping at each one of these passes, basically lowering the surface area down to an even level, but I'm not going into any of those previous cuts. Very mesmerizing to do this. It's actually quite enjoyable and somewhat therapeutic to just kind of relax and clear away this material. I actually have my tool rest a little too high there. I need to bring that down. You could see it when I was reaching up to get to that center point. So then I reverse the cut and take away material from the area where so I can get down into the wall of the bowl. Ooh, did you see that? Let's watch that again. Right there, the bowl gouge went too far and then hit that previous pass. Like I just mentioned, it's too much for the bowl gouge to take and make a big cut like that. So what happened? Well, believe it or not, I just for that split second was thinking about something else I need to do, and I wasn't 100% focused on that cut, and I went beyond the point where I should have, and it called me on it. And that's kind of one of the things that's so great about turning, and especially turning wood bowls, is you need to be focused and you need to stay engaged with what you're doing. You don't have time for your mind to wander, and you definitely don't have time or the opportunity for there to be any distractions. Even just a simple stray thought in your mind can take you away from what you're doing and cause an issue. Now, that shouldn't be intimidating. That actually should be somewhat exciting to think about, because this is one of the reasons why I believe people often say that turning bowls is therapeutic or relaxing. Because what's happening? Well, you're staying 100% focused on what you're doing. You're engaged. Your mind's not wandering on, problems or issues. You're not thinking about what you have to do or what happened. You don't have any time for that. You're focused 100%. It's a lot like meditating. Your mind is not wandering. It is highly focused. And that's when you get into a flow state as well. That's where things just happen effortlessly because you're very focused on what's happening. And time seems to just evaporate. How many times, if you are a bowl turner and you've turned several bowls, how many times have you started turning a bowl and stepped away from the lathe when you're done, only to realize that several hours have gone by when you have no sense of time at all? Well, that's what flow state is. And the reason you're in flow state is because your mind isn't able to wander around on all these different topics. You don't have monkey mind or monkey brain when you're turning wood bowls. You have a very focused, very concentrated mind, because if you don't, you're going to have nasty problems. And this is also a great lesson too. If you are having problems with the bowl gouge getting catches and that, part of it might be that you're not paying attention as closely as you need to be. Okay, so now it's time for the secret weapon. This is my micro bevel bowl gouge. And if you want to learn more about this, I've got a video all about it. Imagine. I've got videos on pretty much everything, and I have articles on everything you're seeing here. If you go to my website, turnawoodbowl.com, you will find out more information about how to turn a bowl and all the aspects and different techniques needed for bowl turning than you will pretty much anywhere else. And I also have some great courses there that you might want to check out. I show how to shape and sharpen bowl gouges. I show how to deal with raw wood in the Treatable online course. And I have a course all about how to turn bowls from start to finish. And we walk through all of that. So you might want to check that out. I've got a ton of information there, but the reason I brought that up is I do have an article all about the micro bevel bowl gouge that you're seeing here and why it's so important. Essentially, this tool allows me to reach down into the bottom of the bowl, and those wings that you see around me now are not in the way. You obviously need to be careful not to hit those wings with your tool, and the micro bevel bowl gouge is really nice to get down into this bowl without there being any issues with it coming engaged with the sides of the bowl that you're seeing here. And this micro bevel bowl gouge is shaped out of a 5/8 inch bowl gouge. Now, this brings up another point, is that bowl gouges are essentially just a basic tool. The way you shape them can be done, it can be shaped in a variety of different manners for different purposes. Exactly like this. This is a 5/8 inch bowl gouge that's designed to get down into the bottom of the bowls. My previous bowl gouge you saw me using I used to rough the outside of the bowls. That was also a 5/8 inch bowl gouge. Both of those bowl gouges can be purchased exactly the same, and then you can shape them to whatever you'd like. Now, I teach how to shape and how to sharpen these tools in my tool sharpening course. That's an online course. You're definitely going to want to check that out. Super valuable course, very affordable, very reasonable. I have thousands of people in this course right now, and they are learning and have learned how to shape their tools to best fit their needs when they're turning wood bowls. So now I've got the wall thickness of this bowl down to pretty much where I need it. I'm just now making light cuts, and I'm going to sneak up on that final shape for the inside of this bowl. And as you can see, I'm just taking off just a hair with each pass. And it's better to come up short than to go too deep. So I've just stopped there to check, and it's obviously a little high. You can see that with the shadow line. So I'm going to just take my time and make light passes and sneak up on the depth that I want. Now the inside bottom of the bowl, you really want that to be a subtle, shallow, concave curve. You don't want it to be flat, and you obviously don't want there to be convex, like a little nub there in the middle. You want it to be a continuously flowing curve across the bottom of the bowl. You shouldn't feel anything. By the time the bowl is turned and sanded, it should just be a nice flowing curve. There should be no point at the center bottom of the bowl that you even notice. All right, it feels really good there. Now I'm going to go around the bowl, and I'm going to sand through all the grits. I'm going to start with 120, go to 180, and 120 and 180, I'm going to very carefully remove any tool marks and take my time. And then from 240 to 320, basically is going to be refining those surfaces. Now I'm going to use some lacquer here on these pith areas. There are some hairline cracks there, and I'm using lacquer. If you saw my cracks, how to deal with cracks video, you know why I'm using the lacquer here. Essentially, I'm making a mask to prevent that CA. I'm using super thin CA, and I'm using the lacquer on the surface to mask it so that the CA doesn't stain the in-grain surface. And I use a little bit of shavings to wipe away any excess CA. But the super thin CA will go all the way through that crack and help fuse it together. So while it's drying, it doesn't break apart any more than it does already. And I'm going to go around and I'm going to fill some of these other small cracks with glue. I could use this, I'm using this glue because I have it out. I could use the other glue I use as a Tight Bond 2. That's a glue that I feature in that crack video that you're going to want to check that out too. If you want to learn how to deal with cracks at any stage, whether they're small or large, I've got a video all about dealing with cracks. You can check that one out. So I'll just take my time and work around the perimeter, smoothing out the areas that have been glued and that might have any kind of tool marks or stains on those, and sand those off with the more coarse grit, the 120 and 180, and then work down to the 240 and 320. Now, I don't sand a ton. I sand enough. And there are people that are meticulous about sanding, and I respect that and everything, but I don't want to spend hours sanding. I typically spend maybe 15, 20 minutes sanding a bowl like this. And that's including fixing those little cracks and everything. And I will get a really good finish when I'm done with this. Okay, so we can take this out. Now I'm going to reverse this because it's time to shape the foot of this bowl. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse the bowl in the jam chuck, and I've got a piece of padding inside to prevent the inside of the bowl from getting scuffed up. And I'm going to match the previous tailstock pin in the center, and I'll be centered up automatically just by doing that. That's what another nice reason or nice capability of having the tailstock up is it marks where your center of the bowl is. Now I'm going to take the shoulder down and start shaping what will be the foot of this bowl. I don't want it to be super tall. I won't use the tenon and that portion, so I'm going to take the overall size down to the height that I want it to be. And that's looking pretty good right there. I've got a little bit of the roughed area from that bark still on there, so I'm going to probably take that size down just a touch. It's always a good idea to do push cuts in towards the headstock, and that creates less stress on the mount that we have right now. And I'm going to use my spindle detail gouge to crispen up that inside corner, just like I do on the bottom of my tenons. There we go. It's got a nice clean corner there, and I'm flip the spindle detail gouge over and use just the bottom edge to scrape that smooth. And I'll take a moment to sand that and blend it in with the rest of the exterior of the bowl. Okay, now we can shape the bottom of the foot. Using my 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge, I'm going to first flatten the edge of the foot, or what will be the foot. And then I'm going to start removing the material inside the foot. Now, if I left this foot big and thick like this, it is definitely going to crack. That chunk of wood that you see right there is holding plenty of moisture. The thin walls of the bowl are holding a little bit of moisture, but they're going to lose their moisture very fast compared to that thick area. This is how it looks when it's mounted to the jam chuck from the other side. It's well supported. Now I'm going to use the bottom wing of my bowl gouge and just lightly carve out the inside of this foot. Now what I'm doing is I'm making the walls of the foot the same thickness as the walls of the bowl. It's a delicate process. You definitely want to go slow and take your time. And you really don't want to catch here, because a catch here is probably going to create a hiccup and throw this whole thing off the lathe. But you can just lightly make very delicate cuts here, making a scraping cut to finish up the inside wall of that rim of the foot. Just take your time and go very slow. You want your tool to be very sharp here. Go back to the sharpening station if you feel like the tool's not sharp. Now, the bowl gouge is completely open there. The flute is straight up. If I accidentally engage that corner and get too much material in there, I'm going to have a catch. So again, you want to go really slow and use a lot of control to make very light cuts. Also, when the nub of the tenon here is this small, do not apply new pressure on the tailstock. Any new pressure, because this area, the amount of wood there is so small, it's most likely going to fold that wood and break it, so you won't have a connection anymore. You really needed to make sure you had a snug connection before this, and then just leave it until we're completely done, and then this nub will be removed. This is a relatively long nub that I have compared to a lot of the bowls. You could cut this off and sand it down. I'm going to turn away most of this, and I'll have a very small nub that gets sanded away at the very end. I'm using my spindle detail gouge here to take this nub down even farther. And I want to make sure that the bottom of this foot has a nice continuous concave shape. It's basically the bottom, the exterior bottom of the bowl. And we'll take it down a little bit farther. I've taken the lathe speed down a touch here. There's no sense of getting excessive with the speed. Basically apply some pressure inward, turn it, and those fibers will disconnect. And there's the outside of the bowl. Okay, so I sanded off the little nub area in the center, and I'm going to go ahead and sign this, and then we'll be ready to apply finish. All right, the finish that I'm using, this has been transferred to a glass jar, and this is not homemade. The finish that I'm using is tried and true Danish oil, which is 100% linseed oil that has been processed. It's been boiled, and it's been boiled the old traditional way without any chemical or metal additives for dryers, and it's just a great product. You essentially need a very thin coat over the whole surface. Now, all of this exposed end grain around the pith area is really soaking up this oil, which is exactly what we want. That end grain area around the pith is going to dry much faster than the side grain areas. The side grain areas basically have more moisture trapped in them
than the ingrained areas. What the oil's doing is kind of sealing up these exposed ingrains, and it slows down the drying process on the ingrained areas, and it evens out the drying process. When we have uneven drying, that's when we have cracking. Now, the way that we handle raw wood has so many different aspects to it that I actually have an entire course online just for it. It's called Treatable Understanding Green Wood. I highly recommend checking that out if you have access to raw timber and you'll be making your own bowl blanks. Especially, you're really going to want to know all of the aspects of what to do when you have raw wood. But one of the major things that you need to be aware of is that uneven drying causes cracking. It's one of the main reasons what causes cracking. There's other reasons, and we deal with that extensively in that course. So I'm going to do the interior here, and look at that wood grain pop. Oh my goodness, this is so gorgeous. Now you see how this appears to be a relative of the olive tree. If you ever had a chance to see or work with olive wood, you can see the similarities going on here. Those hairline cracks that are in the pith, I'm not super concerned with those. I think they're going to be fine. And remember, we've sealed those with the CA, the super thin CA glue. I think those are going to be fine. I will allow this oil to dry and cure really well over the course of a few days, and I'll probably apply a second coat so that this will build up, especially on the ingrain where it's really soaking that up. And yes, I do apply the oil directly to the bark, and it does a good job of protecting the bark as well on a live edge bowl. This wood is just so gorgeous. There it is, the finished live edge ligustrum bowl from an entire log, including the pith, which breaks the rules in wood turning. We'll see what happens in the long run with this piece. It's going to be very interesting. Look at those grains. Isn't nature amazing? Love the way this turned out.
Well, here it is, a bowl that breaks the rule by including the pith in the side of the bowl, both on opposite sides, on the outside and the inside. We've turned the entire log side grain, which is not a normal thing to be doing. Now, like I said earlier, this really won't work well for certain wood species. Ligustrum, there's a certain quality about this wood. I don't know how to explain it. It's almost as if it has like a oily, buttery kind of texture to it, and it seems to dry slower and even and kind of takes a shape as it dries. That's not a good description, but it's different than most woods. Most woods will dry. They're going to look for any kind of areas where there's tension and just crack wherever they can find any tension points. The ligustrum seems to kind of ease into its shape, which is really nice, and I really enjoyed turning this. I don't get a lot of this to turn, and this is the largest piece by far that I've ever turned. The wood grain of this is just absolutely gorgeous. It has a quality that's unlike any other wood that I've turned. It has this organic kind of caramelized layering that's it's just really nice to look at, and it's just a gorgeous wood. Now, there were some surface cracks, and those are to be expected. This has been sitting out for maybe 2-3 months, and the interior retained moisture while the exterior was drying, so some cracks moved down. Those have been glued. Those should be relatively stable so they don't expand. There are some hairline fractures in both the pith areas right now, but those are very fine, and if you recall, we filled those with CA, super thin CA, so it soaks down in there and grips that. Hopefully that will grip and hold on long enough that during the entire drying process, it doesn't allow that to expand and break open. I think we're going to be okay. Now, this really nice curve that's been created here is most likely going to change over time. I'm expecting this pith area to appear as if it's moving out, but really what's going to happen is the surrounding side grain wood is going to contract inward and make the pith area look like it's pushing out on both sides. But we'll have to wait and see how that works. I did a smaller piece that has an appearance like that. All right, guys, if you've liked this video, do me a huge favor and click that like button and leave me a comment below and let me know what you think. And you know what? I can already anticipate a whole bunch of comments right now. Are you going to show us this bowl later after it's dried? I bet that bowl cracks into a million pieces. I can already anticipate some of the comments, and I completely understand. So what I'm going to do, if you're subscribed and you've clicked the bell, you're going to be notified in my future videos. I don't know how long this is going to take to dry, but over the next few weeks after this dries, I'm going to share it with you guys inside one of my other videos. So you need to make sure you're watching all of my upcoming videos, but I will show you this bowl after it's had a chance to dry, and we'll see how it's changed. Now, remember that little hairline crack on the pith area? And remember the cracks on the edges that we sealed with the glue and the sawdust. So just remember those. Those will be there. Let's see if they expand or see what happens to them. And remember how this curve appears right here. You're going to want to see how that changes as the bowl dries. I know I'm going to want to see how it changes. Now, I may apply a couple other layers of oil. The oil is a great little secret, not only as a finish, but to help ease the end grain. The end grain, if you remember, if you think about straws going this way, we've cut the ends open on both sides. So any moisture in this end grain area is going to evaporate very quickly, but the side grain is going to take longer. When we have different or differentiating amounts of moisture, that's when cracks can form. So by adding the oil to the end grain, it slows the drying process a little bit in the end grain and helps even out that drying process. So applying the oil has a couple of different benefits, and one of them is to prevent the cracking over the drying process. So that's something to keep in mind. And like I said, I'll probably apply a couple more coats to that. I'll let each coat dry over the course of a few days and then apply another one. So we'll see how this turns out. All right, guys, I hope you've liked this video. If you have liked this video, click that like button. Did I say that already? Well, if I didn't, please check. Click the like button. Thank you very much. I appreciate you doing that. All right, guys, as always, until next time, happy turning.